Hello friends, this is Shivam Dubey from English Kingdom Katra, Prayagraj. Welcome to the class. Here now we are going to start another Indian poet, and I think you may have guessed it from the heading, because in heading we have included the name of one of the greatest Indian English poet who could give a particular touch or a particular shape to the poetry in English in India. Good evening, Nirja. Good evening, Ashutosh. Today we will start a lecture on Nissim Ezekiel. The lecture will be on Nissim Ezekiel. Okay. Good evening, Afshan. Good evening, Archana, Sunita, Deendayal, Pradeep, Pooja. Good evening, everyone. So, before we come to the points that are actually related to the poet, dramatist, essayist, Nissim Ezekiel, we have to see something that's related to the life or history of the Ezekiel, the society he belongs to, the culture he inherited, the society where he lived, and lots of things. I have said it many a time in my teaching. Whenever there is a poet who is born, he is born out of two things: the elements that he receives from society and the elements that he receives from his personal life. And that is not going to be an exception about Nissim Ezekiel as well. Here, Nissim Ezekiel and his roots will be discussed. Let's go to the point. Generally, we know that Nissim Ezekiel belongs to a society that is called to be Ben Israel. That's a society. Actually, what was this society, or what does this mean by society? We go back to the history of the Ben society. Actually, there are three groups in this society. This had been the group of Jews. Means Jewish society. Jewish society. And as I told you, primarily, good evening, Meera, good evening, Supriya. This Jewish society had been divided in three parts. The one is here, Ben Israel's. The second one is related to Iraq, and they are called Iraqi Jews. Iraqi Jews. And there are the third that are called to be Cochin Jews. Iraqi Jews, Cochin Jews, and Ben Israel. These are the three Jewish society who had their roots in India. Why they came here in India? There is a long history and different sources. According to some sources, they had been made to leave their own native places like Israel and have come to India. And so is about the Iraqi. They have also to leave their Iraq and come to here. There had been many myths, we can say. And there is one more thing that I want to tell. Often there is a discussion among these Jewish societies in India who actually came first in India. Often there is a discussion. And most of the time, Ben Israels consider themselves to be the first one appearing in India. These had been the outsiders, means I call that these Israels had been the outsiders. Good evening, Pushpalata. Good evening, Mamta. And they had come to stay here in India. This means they will have to live a very miserable life. When this Ben Israel is translated in English, it means children of Israel. Children of Israel. Ben Israel means children of Israel. They find their own root in Israel and called themselves to be the children of Israel. After living for a long time in India, they had been considered a very poor and lower social class. Lower than even the lowest caste in Hindus or any other caste. The word we use for these Jewish society is there like Saturday oilmen. Saturday oilmen. In Hindi, the word telis, you know that in Hindi, oilmen means telis, and they had to move from one place to the next place to sell their oil, to sell their tel. But in Indian society, except this Jewish society that was considered to be Saturday oilmen, there were two other oilmen categories. One that represented the Muslim society and was called to be Friday oilmen. Friday oilmen. And there had been another society in Hindus, they were called to be Monday oilmen. Monday oilman. Means in our community, in those days, even before the birth of Nissim Ezekiel, before the birth of the father of Nissim Ezekiel, or I can say during the life of the grandfather of Nissim Ezekiel, the name of his grandfather was Haskeldi Israel. Haskeldi Israel. If you see that the word Israel is used here, it means place, name of place where Haskeldi originally belongs to. And this didn't happen only in their relations, but even when they started living in India, according to the name of the place, they were termed. And name of the place was included with the name of person. Like you see, the name of Nissim Ezekiel's father, because Haskelji started living at Tal, or sometimes it is Tal. This is the place where Haskelji lived, and Moses, Ezekiel, Talkar were born there. I'm just trying to tell you, Moses, Ezekiel, Talkar. See this one. You know, the name of the place, Talkar, is included with the name of not only Moses Israel, Ezekiel, but also with Nissim Ezekiel. Sometimes we will find that the name of Nissim Ezekiel is Nissim Ezekiel Talkar. That's the point you will have to remember. And it is because of the name of the place in India, because this had been the origin in Israel, and in India they belong to the place Tal. So the name of Nissim Ezekiel is here, like Nissim Ezekiel Talkar. So this Talkar, as I told you, is from the place where they belong to in India. So these three oil men were there, and the condition of Jewish oil men was poorer, because before Jewish oil men, there were Hindus oil men, Monday oil men, there were Muslim oil men, Friday oil men, and these Jewish oil men were considered to be untouchable. Even in untouchable, there was a subcategory that they were worse than them. They were worse than them, and they were not considered to be touchable and not allowed to walk in the field openly. They were actually forced to keep themselves away from the common society, as they are alien, not to mingle with society. This happened, but the things started changing. These Jewish people started feeling themselves Indian, and most of the time the family of Nissim Ezekiel, after Haskelji Israel, they settled in Bombay. Good evening, Pratik. Good evening, Preeti. Good evening, Mamta. They settled in Bombay, okay? And now they live in Bombay as he was born in Bombay as well. And it was because of Haskelji Israel. Haskelji Israel had his experience in the Boer War. The Boer War, which is generally termed as African War, African European War, that took place during 1880s, or primarily the term is given that it took place between 1899 to 1901. Almost 3 years it continued. So 99, 1900 and 1901, that had been the time, the Boer War. And Haskelji Israel took part here in the Boer War. He was a soldier, as we can see. But after leaving this soldiership, he could understand that there was no future of his and his children if they still live the life like that. And that is why a job he had chosen was teaching. And I can So teaching becomes a kind of family job. After Haskelji, Moses, means father of Nissim Ezekiel, was a teacher. His mother was a teacher. He himself was a teacher. Means almost family members followed this job. That seems to be the job of honor, job of skill, and job of not salary in those days, because such a little salary was given to teachers in those days. So it wasn't a handy job. Instead, it was a great job. Well, so teaching because of Haskelji, and it was Haskelji who encouraged his son Moses Ezekiel Talker and his wife Diana. Diana was the name of the mother of Nissim Ezekiel, that they should settle in Bombay in those days. And they settled. Moses was a teacher, and definitely Diana was also teacher. I will explain it later. So now Ben Israel or Jewish society started feeling privileged, started doing actions or works that could encourage or that could earn them name and fame in their society. And now during the 18th century, they started thinking of being literal, and in 19th century they tried their hand in writing as well. It is in 19th century, the date is not very fixed, that the printing press, first Jewish printing press, was established in Bombay. First printing press, Jewish printing press, remember, first Jewish printing press was established or founded in Bombay, and the publications of the works from the Jewish society started. We see that in 18th century there was a poet Emolji Nagakar. M-O-G. Nagakar. Nagakar. He seemed to be from 18th century, a famous poet and singer. There was next Robenji Isaji Nagaonkar. Robenji Isaji Nagaonkar. The two had been, Robenji had been from 19th century, Emolji had been from 18th century, and they had actually helped, they were actually oral poets, oral singer of this Ben Israel society, or we call to be Jewish society. But they established a kind of literary taste among their Jewish people, and the development was here in the hand of the persons to come. We see that Gul and Sanobar was published. Gul and Sanobar was published. Gul and Sanobar is considered to be the first Ben Israel pupil, Ben Israel society that published a work. It was written by Joseph Thalker. Joseph Bahas, exactly the complete name is Bahas Joseph Thalker. And he wrote this work and it was published. This Gul and Sanobar is the first published work, remember, first published work of Ben Jewish community, okay, Ben Israel community, and that appeared in 1867. Gul and Sanobar was published in 1867, means in 19th century. Definitely it was not written in English. And when it comes to the family of Nissim, I will talk to you later that it was Marathi that became their own tongue and seemed to be the mother tongue of this whole community. Exactly. So it's 1867 when Gul and Sanobar was the first work of Ben Israel community. Novel that was written by M.D. Thalker. It was written by M.D. Thalker. Means you see, the people from people from Tal, they had developed their taste in literature, taste in writing. I told you the background that Haskelji, after coming back from the Boer War, decided to be teacher, and from there we find that the family of Nissim Ezekiel is going to be changed. After coming to know the facts related to this Jewish society, Jewish community, now we have to come to the facts that were related to Nissim Ezekiel. Nissim Ezekiel Thalker. Okay, If you remember one of his very famous poem, in background casually we see that Nissim Ezekiel calls himself a poet, a rascal. He was poet, he was a rascal, and he called himself poet and rascal. Why such words he has used for himself? There isn't anything like mystery, but definitely a poet like him, and he wrote not very in early stage of his life this poem. He wrote it when he was actually established poet, established critic, established editor, established teacher. But he wrote this one. Why? Let's go to the background of this family. Nissim has used the word poor for his family or poor for his father. Exactly. The question is there. Were they poor? The family of Nissim Ezekiel was poor. As I told you, that grandfather was a general during the Boer War, a Skaldy. Father was a teacher, was a professor. And mother was running her own school. Cannot say that they were actually poor. But yes, it was very difficult for them to survive in the upper class society. I told you that they were considered before this modernization to be untouchable in society. And that may have colored the feeling of Nissim Ezekiel as well. Because after his almost separation from his wife, he grew careless about his dress. Nobody knows why, but seems that he was trying to follow the very model of the poets and journalists, because we generally estimate great poets and journalists according to their dress. Good evening, Suman. So here the family doesn't seem to be very poor one, but he has used many a time this word poor. Okay. About the parentage, I told you that it is Moses Ezekiel Thalker. Moses Ezekiel Thalker and mother Diana. The two had 5 surviving children. They had 5 surviving children. Out of these 5, they had 3 sons and 2 daughters. 3 sons and 2 daughters. I told you that Moses was the professor of botany and zoology at Wilson College. Wilson College. That was at Chowpatty. In Mumbai. He was a professor, remember, a professor of botany and zoology. At first, Diana, it seems that she was an actress. It seems that possibly she was a stage actress, and After getting married, she started doing the job of teacher. At first, possibly she was teaching at some government school that was run for poor children, poor community, and she wasn't given a proper salary. Possibly she was not teaching for salary as well. And they had 5 children, as I told you. So the family was well educated, and both Moses and Diana were open-minded. Open-minded means never emphasized or never forced their children to follow their path. Means if they are teacher, they never tried to force their children to be the teacher. Instead, they gave the liberty of thought to them. And that's why we see that none of the children of Moses could study science. Definitely, Nissim Ezekiel became the teacher, but he was not the teacher of science or botany or geology. He was teacher of English. Okay? So, out of these 5 surviving children, Nissim Ezekiel was third child. There seemed to be a kind of combinations, and these combinations are going to be the children of the parents. Here we will find that the first was eldest one was a son. Out of that was Joe. Joe was the eldest child and was son. Joe was followed by Sarah. Sarah was the eldest daughter. Sarah was the eldest daughter. Joe was followed by Nissim. Nissim, the third child of Moses and Diana. The fourth was Hanan, and the last one was Lily. Okay, the 3 sons you see, Joe, Nissim, Hanan, they were the 3 sons. Sarah, Lily, they were the 2 daughters. Okay? Well, so in that way, Joe was the eldest and Lily was the youngest. Okay? Nissim Ezekiel was born on 16th December. He was born on 16th that the parents were very much serious about the education of the children, and the poorer life were very poor. Chol were by the place of Baikula Bridge. Baikula Bridge in Bombay. Naturally, he was in Bombay, and as we know that now Bombay is Mumbai, Maharashtra. So he was born. It means he wasn't entered hospital. The parents seemed to be very poor, and they were unable to take the responsibility or were unable to afford the expenses of the hospital. So the boy was born in a chawl, and I think that shows the poor condition of the child on 16th December 1924. After almost 8 days, or we can say on 8th day, so this no ritual that took place when the boy is just 8 days older, and this is why the boy that was born on 16th December was circumcised on 24th December. The place where he was circumcised was Magen Hasidim. Magen Hasidim synagogue. That's the name of Magen Hasidim synagogue at Agripada. Agripada. So that's the place where Nissim Ezekiel's circumcision took place on 24th December. It had been a particular ritual in this society of Israel's, Ben Israel. Nissim had developed a little interest in politics. He had started watching bird flying as well. Lots of things in his life took place. I will explain. After growing up, he goes to the next level and his education has to be started. Well, after growing up, he had to go to his school, that was Convent of Jesus and Mary. Convent of Jesus and Mary. Difficult to tell the year when he joined this convent of Jesus and Mary, but it seems that it might have been between 1930 or 1931. Why? Because after passing his second standard, he got education till his second standard. Okay? His admission took place to a college, actually named was Antonio de Souza High School. Antonio de Souza High School. The admission of Nissim Ezekiel at Antonio de Souza High School took place in 1934. 1934. Later on, this Antonio de Souza High School was named as Gloria Church School. Gloria Church School. In 1934, he got his admission, and a very interesting thing happened. He lived there till 1941. In 1941, he passed his 7th standard, and hopefully in those days 7th standard was matriculation. If you remember, the 7th standard was matriculation. So he matriculated in in 1914 and left Antonio de Souza High School. One interesting thing that took place at Antonio de Souza High School was his interest in poetry, and the second thing, his first effort to write poetry. The third thing is to meet and become the friend of Raj Kapoor. All those who are fond of Indian cinema, they know that Raj Kapoor was given the title Showman. Hindi film Showman, Raj Kapoor was his classmates. Raj Kapoor was his classmate at Antonio de Souza High School. Naturally, while studying as a student at Antonio de Souza High School, Nissim was not a very bright student, average student, and in sports games, an utter failure upward there. Utter failure in games and sports. This sense of failure haunted him lifelong. One more thing he tried at his school, that was to act, and tried stage in schools. But there had problem, especially this was acting. Whenever he is to act on the stage, forgot his dialogue. And for this, again there is a failure, sense of failure in his life. He started thinking not to pursue the career of a sportsman, though he loved the sport. Not to pursue the career of an actor. He has a great love for acting, he has a great love for stage, but unfortunately he wasn't a good actor. Well, but this friendship had no effect on his education or anything. Once when he was interviewed in a joke, he never wrote his autobiography, but in a joke he said if he had to write ever his autobiography, he would have given 1,000 failures. 1,000 failures. This would have been the title of his autobiography. It's okay, he never wrote this autobiography, but the failure of school at school, that was Antonio de Souza School, in sports, in games, in acting, that had made a special effect on him. And as a student, he was not very bright, I told you already, not a very bright one. So something like very dull and not very prosperous or very interesting happening in his life. And he was trying his level best. One thing happened, and it seems he was just a 12-year-old in 1936. Because in an interview, he himself told that he wrote poetry when he was just 12-year-old. It means, calculation says in 1936, he started writing his poetry. He had no great interest, as I told you, in science, but he loved his teacher, Mr. Abraham. Mr. Abraham was his teacher of English poetry. And he explained poetry so well that Nissim had only this teacher as his love at Antonio de Souza High School. Once he wrote a poem, and there is not very clear name of a woman teacher. She actually mocked him. You can write a statement. I am going to dictate. When he wrote, he was just 12-year-old, not very grown up. When he wrote a poem, he didn't encourage him. Instead, tried to discourage, mocked him, saying this statement. Please note down. Ah, A-H, ah, comma, ha, H-A, ha, comma. Listen, all of you. Listen, all of you, comma. We have a poet in the class. We have a poet in the class. So she said that there was a poet in the class, and it was not a kind of appreciation. I want to tell you. Don't think to appreciate him. She said, ah, ha, ha. You see, that's kind of mocking. And that is a very statement, that is a very age. When Nissim Ezekiel decided that he will become the poet, he will pursue the career of a poet. There is a statement of Nissim, please write down. I decided at that moment, I decided at that moment, comma, whatever happens, comma, I am going to write poetry. I am going to write poetry. Good, bad, or indifferent. Good, bad, or indifferent. Well, so see this statement of the women teacher. Definitely she mocked, but it had a kind of influence on him, impact on him, that he at once decided to be a teacher. He will pursue the career of teacher. He will write poetry. He is not going to think whether his poetry is good or whether his poetry will be bad, whatever kind of poetry it will be, but he will pursue the career of poet. Once after a long time, it seemed, the date is not very confirmed, that Raj Kapoor met Nissim Ezekiel during their flight, and in that flight, the statement that Raj Kapoor used for Nissim Ezekiel was a very shorter one, and he said Nissim was a poet. Nissim was a poet. This had been the statement and exactly mark of exclamation. Don't know whether it was a mocking or appreciation, but yes, he said in a flat that Nissim was a poet. After matriculated in 1941, he had to try for his graduation and took admission in 1941 for 4-year BA program. 4 years BA. And this was not possible at Antonio de Souza High School. So he goes to his next school, and that was the school or college of his own father, Wilson College. Wilson College. So he started his graduation with a 4-year plan in 1941, and after 2 years he was intermediate in arts. Means in 1943 he completed his enter arts. Now he had to go to seriously to this graduation, and he had to decide his language, means subject, whether it will be English or science or Hindi or Marathi, anything. And he ultimately selected or chosen it to be English. So from 1943 to 1945, he pursued his graduation and completed his BA of 4-year program in 1945. When he passed in 1945, he had to go to the world of Western literature during his graduation, and it was graduation when he took poetry even more seriously. No doubt when he was just 12-year-old, he said this, but it would have been a kind of a talk or discourse of a child. But during his graduation, he had to study the poets in England, from Chaucer to T.S. Eliot. And we all know that T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, W.B. Yeats, and W.H. Auden, these poets of Western world had a great influence on Nissim Ezekiel as a poet. Sometimes he finds himself under the revolution that is called to be Pound-Eliot revolution. Pound-Eliot revolution. We all know that Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot had been great masters in literature. Their way of writing was extraordinarily modern. They didn't follow the track that was already set. They were trying to make their own track. And that's how they became the model for Nissim Ezekiel. And that's what we see in the works of W.B. Yeats or W.H. Auden as well. And they all had been his inspiration in poetry, especially Eliot, Pound and Yeats. Definitely Auden had been, but not so much. After passing his graduation in 1945 with his first class, he had to go for his MA, master degree, and again it was English literature. Another 2 years he is going to be there, means from 1945 to 1947 he will be pursuing his post-graduation, and with that he will have to sign a contract to be teacher, and he taught there at Wilson College from June 1945, taught at Wilson College from June 1945 to June 1947. It was a scholarship program that was to be named as Fellow of Wilson College. Fellow of Wilson College. It was so easy in those days to find job after getting such great degrees like graduation and pursuing master graduation, because not the similar condition that we are living in. When he was teaching, he tried to pursue teaching in another college, and that was Hansraj Morarji School. Hansraj Morarji School to write there, to teach there English. He was teaching there, and possibly he could complete just one semester there, one term there, because of the objection of the Wilson College authorities. Wilson College authorities thought it a kind of violation of the rules of college. One who is receiving the fellowship of the college cannot teach in any other college or schools. Okay, so he just left after completing one term. Almost for 6 months he taught there and continued teaching students of inter and graduation English literature, especially English poetry. So after 1947 he had again to go for his job and searched, but he couldn't find the job at Wilson College. Definitely it was his priority. He had applied for a post of teacher at Hansraj Morarji School. Okay, and as I told you that he got admission there. After completing his teaching at Wilson College, he left, and now he will have to go for the next. One special thing after passing his post graduation is that he won a prize, that is R.K. Lagu Prize. In 1947 he won R.K. Lagu Prize. That seems to be the first prize that he won for his performance as a student. After leaving, he had to go for different places or different colleges to seek a job for himself. His life is full of variation, and many adventurous things happened. He tried to go to different places and tried different things. He was not very much rich, but he had good friends. Almost from 1947 June and till 1948, he had not a very clear records. Possibly he was writing for the press, because some of his poems, when he was at school or college, we can say, when got entrance early age, his poems were published in the college, university college, and it was the university magazine where the first pieces of his were published, and then many newspapers were there. They started writing it, and one of them was the Thought. One of them was the Thought. In Thought, some of his poems were published in early stages. But in 1948, he met a friend of his named Abraham Al-Qazi. Abraham Al-Qazi. Abraham Al-Qazi was a renowned stage actor, and in those days he was acting at the theater group. You know, Nissim also wanted to be an actor, but unfortunately he couldn't. So the friendship of Abraham Al-Qazi and Nissim was going to be fruitful. But meanwhile, you know that India was going through the struggle for freedom, though these Ben Israel had not a very clear their participation, but yes, there was M.N. Roy. M.N. Roy, a political leader, and he was running a political party, Radical Democratic Party. Radical Democratic Party. And Nissim Ezekiel joined this party. He, under the influence of M.N. Roy, he joined this Radical Democratic Party. But he knew that this politics is not going to help him. There is a statement of Nissim Ezekiel, please note down. The statement of Nissim Ezekiel, please. I am at a dead end. I am at a dead, D-E-A-D, dead end. Now between poetry and politics. Now between poetry and politics. Semicolon. It is a most unholy mess. It is a most unholy mess. You see, it is a most unholy mess. Okay? What it means? That he was almost unable to make balance. He was almost unable to make balance between poetry and politics. He couldn't enjoy being in politics led by M.N. Roy and decided to leave it, decided to go away from this politics and live his own world, live his own world of writing. And that was his world of literature. During his school days at Wilson College, he got an opportunity to become friend with Abraham Solomon. Abraham Solomon. He was almost 8 to 10 years senior, older than him, and they met around 1941, and that was at Wilson College. They formed good friendship, and after a phase of time, Abraham was able to make him understand the ideas on international atheism and rationalism. International atheism and rationalism. You must remember that Nissim Ezekiel was a rationalist. He didn't follow any ritual blindly, but one thing that he had a great connection with his community. I want to remind you, there is a community that tastes the manhood, and this community, this ceremony is known as Bar Mitzvah. Bar Mitzvah. This had been actually a ritual, and the ritual means when the boy is 13-year-old. If you try to understand about Nissim Ezekiel, so it seems around 1937. So they had to appear in Bar Mitzvah. There their manhood is to be tasted. I think you understand. Manhood is to be tasted. Means after being 13-year-old, 13-year-old, a boy should have the ability of being a man, means his manhood is to be tasted, is to be examined, in fact, in medical terms. So it was the place Rodef Shalom, Rodef Shalom synagogue. Rodef Shalom synagogue, where this Bar Mitzvah of Nissim Ezekiel took place when he was just 13-year-old, and later on when his son Elkanah became 13-year-old, he again came with his son to Rodef Shalom synagogue, and he also had to go through this Bar Mitzvah. Okay, so it was the Abraham Solomon under whose influence he could have the information of international atheism and rationalism. Later on in his life, there was Zafar Futehli. Zafar Futehli. Zafar Futehli had his own group or his own association that was named to be Nalanda Group. Nalanda Group. With Zafar Futehli, he had shown his interest in bird watching. For sometimes he goes for bird watching and became the member of this Nalanda group. But after a short time, he could realize that this is not the world for him to be just going for the bird watching and all this. He left it. And as I told you, by luck, there is a friendship between Abraham Al-Qazi and Nissim Ezekiel. Al-Qazi decided to go to London in 1948 November, and he asked him to accompany him because Al-Qazi was going to Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. So he asked his friend Nissim Ezekiel to accompany him. The first thing that Ezekiel had to consider was what will he do over there. Means if Al-Qazi is going, so he had some work to do there. He will perform, he will learn something about acting. But what will he do? And the second thing was money. He had no money to pay his fare. Actually, here a good luck struck and he was paid the fare by Abraham Al-Qazi, and in November 1948, he left for London, and almost 3.5 years he lived there, means till 1952. Seemed that in 1952 March he decided to leave London, but while at London he got admission at Birkbeck College. Birkbeck College, and pursued his research or PhD, studied philosophy at Birkbeck College in London. He had to come back and got the company of Krishna Prayagraj. Exactly, Krishna Prayagraj was also working there. And in 1952, Krishna had to come to his home here in India, and they got a chance to work at Indochina cargo ship, and it was coming with some ammunitions. They started there as a job, and they were working jobs like deck scrivener and all those. Anyway, when he was in London, Nissim was interested in poetry, and he wrote some pieces of poems, especially the poems that could give him happiness, and that was they given the title, if you remember, A Time to Change. A Time to Change. That is a very interesting story behind the publication of this collection of his poem. That's the first collection of his poem, or first book of poetry, that published in 1952 by the Fortune Press in London. And for this publication of his first book, Nissim Ezekiel had to pay £10. Means he himself paid £10 to the Fortune Press. Otherwise, Fortune Press is not going to publish his work, A Time to Change, that becomes his first published work. But publication was delayed, I think. And in March, possibly in March, Nissim Ezekiel with Krishna Prayagraj decided to come back to his country, and they were on the ship, as I told you, when he received some information about the published work. Definitely it was delayed, but A Time to Change was published by Fortune Press in London, and a copy of this A Time to Change was sent to him. He was coming to India, and on the way he reached Marseilles. There at Marseilles he received the first copy of A Time to Change. Okay, after coming back his country, he had to look for a job because he lost his job, and tried hands at many places, and he was welcomed first by the Khalsa College at King's Circle. Khalsa College at King's Circle. Khalsa College at King's Circle, he was given a chance to teach actually, and almost for 12 months he taught there. Okay, it's a mistake exactly. Before going to London, he taught there. Remember, before going to London, he taught there from June 1947 to June 1948. This is the time that he spent teaching at Khalsa College. But he was tired of teaching, and after 12 months' work, he resigned himself from the post and started writing for the Times of India, Free Press Journal, and Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan Journal. He started editing the journal Freedom First, and definitely his effort established, in the words of Bruce King. Bruce King is a critic of Nissim. Bruce King, that Nissim established Bombay School of Poetry. Bombay School of Poetry. No doubt his contribution is a great one, and possibly not only the Bombay School of Poetry, but if we are going to call him the father of post-independent Indian English verse, father of post-independent Indian English verse. Indian English verse. So it's not going to be hyperbole. Exactly. His contribution can allow us to give him this title. And if King Bruce gave this term Bombay School in his work Modern Indian Poetry in English. Modern Indian Poetry in English. This was the work of Bruce King, and in this work he almost coined the term Bombay School and made Nissim to be the head of this school. So it seems that his appreciation to the peak. The book appeared in 1987. Modern Indian Poetry in English appeared in 1987. He tried to go for some more things, and before we go to this, we will have to check his marital status. Exactly. When he came back from London, the two things he had to do: one, to go for a job, and the next that he was now quite older and he should be married. It seems that in many traditions or in many trends, this Ben Israel followed the Hindu rituals many ways, and even in marriage they were very much traditional, and it seems that it were his parents actually who actually selected a girl, and the girl was one of the 9 children of Isaac and Lily. Isaac and Lily. They had 9 children. Out of these 9, 9 children. There were 5 daughters and 4 sons. 5 daughters and 4 sons. One of the daughters was Daisy Gabriel. One of the daughter was Daisy Gabriel. If we go to the complete name of Daisy Gabriel, because once again they were from the same community, so it is going to be Daisy Jacob Dandekar. Jacob Dandekar. This was the complete name for Daisy Gabriel. Exactly, the two were married on 23rd November. The two were married on 23rd November 1952. About his marriage, he was never very happy. Instead, he used the terms like compromise for the marriage, like compromising or semi-love marriage. Compromising marriage or semi-love marriage. Means in fact, this marriage was not a love marriage at all. It was a semi-love marriage. Parents selected a girl and they two got married. Well, that happened on 23rd November 1952 at Magen David Synagogue. The marriage took place at Magen David Synagogue. It is said that there was a girl named so there was a girl who actually was named Linda Hess. Linda Hess. And it is supposed that Nissim, possibly not very openly, possibly had a relationship with her because she lived in America and he paid a visit to America. And they had formed a strong relationship. This relationship was a reason behind a kind of separation between Nissim and Daisy. After the two had almost 3 children, Daisy and Nissim had 3 children, the 2 daughters and 1 son. That was Elkanah, son was Elkanah, and the daughters were Kavita and Kalpana. The two didn't divorce. Possibly it was because of the thought of Nissim Ezekiel himself. The two didn't divorce, but they were not living very happy life because possibly Nissim had his own secret, and he was very secret man, mysterious man, a word we use. Not only we, but many friends of his used this word for him to be very mysterious man, had lots of secrets. He never talked about his affairs. He never talked about his affairs very openly, but he has actually some affairs. And many female friends or women friends he had. and a possible separation that took place around the 1960s, it may be. He grew very careless about his dress, as I told in the beginning, and sometimes it is the stench smell that started coming out of his cloth, and many times his friends or neighbors had to instruct him for his cloth. So you can see that the poet was actually the poet of body. Exactly, this was a statement from Linda Hayes, that he was poet of body. And why he was attracted to Linda Hayes, it is very natural thing that sometimes scholars try to establish that Linda was very attractive and very intelligent, up to date. And when it comes to Daisy, she seemed to be very kind of uneducated lady and not furnished one. So person may have been attracted to her because of her capacity to do as a strong lady in the world. But what he thought about women was that women always need support of men, always need support of men. But he was futuristic as well, and he said that after some decades this will change. Means definitely before divorce or even after divorce, she, means a woman, needs support of his man, his husband. But very soon this stand will change. He believed it, and as you see that today our women doesn't need, in fact, a man in such a desperate way like they used to do in those days. So the statement that he did was actually about his own liking, but he had a not very clear affair with any lady as to be named, but Linda Hayes is here to be named exactly. After this, he had his own life and possibly he had friendship that he could establish. We must remember that he was throughout his life Indian Pen member. He was member of Indian Pen throughout his life. At first he was its a member, but after the death of Madam Sophia Wadia, he becomes the manager and editor of it as well. He becomes the manager of this Indian Pen after the death of Wadia. So he was the editor of this as well, if you remember. One more thing that I want to tell is that he had tried LSD, very controversial issue, LSD. Actually, it was a drug. Okay, it was a drug, LSD. And it happened that he had to pay his first trip in April 1967. April 1967. It was his first LSD trip at the age of 42, when he was just 42-year old. And in 1969, when he was 44-year old, he took LSD, and according to his record, it was something like 24 times. Around it was 24 times he took LSD. 24 times. LSD was kind of drug scene, you know, and in those days people thought that if a poet takes LSD, the controlled dose of LSD, so he will start going beyond the boundaries of this world and will feel himself to reach to a world where he himself is a master of his own idea, his own mind, and he can go to or explore a new world of imagination. And many poets of those days were trying. He himself tried, but he didn't find it to be very beneficial. And one statement of his is there, please write down. He made a statement on this experiment of his on LSD. He said, I don't regret LSD. I don't regret LSD. Full stop. I did learn a little bit. From that experience. Comma. But I never wanted to continue with it. Means, what he said, that it is not very bad to be trying such things that were new, and many great poets or scholars in those days were trying. But sometimes we take the things as to be overdose and we lose our self-control. So losing self-control was something that he wanted to tell us. And if he did, or if he took LSD, so he was never shameful about his act. And as we see the statement, that he never regretted that he could taste LSD, and 24 times, but he didn't find anything as a result, no difference in his personality. So he thought it was just a needless or useless effort, but he did it. So you will have to take it in attention. As I told, that he became the editor of Indian Pen after the death of Varia in 1986, and throughout his life he was there. He was writing for the magazine, he was promoting great poets. And if you remember that there had been G.V. Patel, and he was also encouraged by Nissim Ezekiel. He promoted him, and almost, if I am not mistaken, he published the first collection of G.V. Patel from there. I think when I was discussing about writer's workshop, who established this writer's workshop primarily? Chalo, come on, you tell the name. Writer's workshop. This had been a publishing house. Who established this publishing house? Come on, tell me. Who established this writer's workshop? Because I had a kind of discussion when I was teaching you Kamala Das in the class, because she also was associated to this publishing house, and its main founder was actually a good friend of Nissim Ezekiel. So he was associated to writer's workshop as well, and some of his poems were published by writer's workshop. By the end of his life, almost the main works like Exact Name, or we can see The Unfinished Man, Exact Name or Unfinished Man, these are the works that were possibly published by writer's workshop. You don't remember the name of the founder of writer's workshop? You guys are very silent. There is no reply at all. I don't think you should forget it. Do you remember? Okay, definitely there are some answers, but it was not showing on the screen, so I could find it. Exactly here we see that from no, I think Neeraj, you have said that BA from 1943 to 1947. No, dear. From 1943 to 1945. The graduation in those days was a 4-year plan, and he got admission in 1941. So from 1941 to 1945 he was graduating. Among those years, the 2 years for intermediate and 2 years for graduation. It was 4-year plan. And from 45 to 47 he was post graduating from there. And after completing post graduation he goes to Khalsa College. Okay, and from there he goes to London. Well, Sarita says, what is semi-love marriage? Exactly, semi-love marriage means there was no love at all, but the love was generated by this marriage. Means if you are married to a man or woman, you will have to feel love for him or her, whether you love her or not, whether you love him or not, but you will have to feel love for him or her. So that is semi-love, or the kind of compromise. And here is answer from Nirja, I think. Exactly, Nirja. She has answered it to be Purushottam Lal. Thank you, dear. So it's P. Lal or Purushottam Lal who was the founding member, or especially the founder of this writers workshop, where Nissim school was also working, and he became the part of this writers workshop. G.U. Patel was also there. And after the death of Madam Sophia Wadia in 1986, as I told you, he becomes the editor of 1986. He becomes the editor of Indian Pen. Okay, so remember that. Well, he had been controversial as well. You remember there was a work of Salman Rushdie, Satanic Verses. Salman Rushdie wrote the Satanic Verses, and it was banned, if you remember, by Salman Rushdie. It was banned, and Nissim school supported this ban. Nissim school supported this ban, and the reason was that he said that nobody is allowed to hurt the sentiment of a community, and through our experiments we often try to challenge the set traditions or trend in society. In that way, somehow a person hurts the community, and that's why, according to him, nobody is allowed to hurt the emotion of anyone. So Salman Rushdie was trying to hurt the emotion of a particular community through these satanic verses, and he was banned, so he supported. There had been criticism, and one more thing happened in the life of Salman Rushdie when he was a member of this Indian Pen, and there is something that he said as a nasty things about Aurobindo Ghosh. Aurobindo Ghosh. Exactly, some nasty thing he said about Aurobindo Ghosh, and there had been many requests to Sophia Wadia that she should, because she was the editor in those days, she should remove Nissim school from there, but she continued, but she was actually attacked for saying some nasty things about Aurobindo Ghosh. But he continued there, and as I told you, in 1986, after the death of Wadia, he becomes the editor of Indian Pen. So Salman Rushdie and Aurobindo Ghosh, these are the two Indian or origin or related persons that had been attacked. One name you will have to remember, that is Ramesh Chandra Sirkar. Ramesh Chandra Sirkar. In fact, Ramesh Chandra Sirkar was introduced by Mumtaz Motiwala. Mumtaz Motiwala. And the introduction was done with the help of Mumtaz with Sirkar in 1952. And Sirkar had been a great help in a literary career of Nissim Ezekiel, and definitely helped him develop his taste in writing and taste in literature seriously. And lots of things that came as a help from Sirkar has been because of this friendship that was helped by Mumtaz Motiwala. I told that after some times, Nissim Ezekiel had been offered a job by a publishing house that was named Shilpi. Very interesting role of Shilpi is there. And he left the job of Illustrated Weekly India. Remember, Illustrated Weekly of India, where he started doing job in 1952 and continued till 1954, I think. For almost 2 years, he worked at Illustrated Weekly of India. But soon, he was offered a job by the publishers of Shilpi, and it happened by the Shilpi's owner, Gira Sarabhai. Gira Sarabhai. And they offered him job in 1954, and after that he was offered the post of manager. This job came to him in 1954. After working for 2 years, he becomes the manager in 1954. 56, not 54. Okay. In 1956, he becomes the manager of Shilpi because of Sarabhai, Gira Sarabhai. And later on, he established his own literary magazine that was named Jumpo. Jumpo was his own literary magazine. Remember, it was literary magazine. And that was founded by Nissim Ezekiel himself. So Sarabhai's contract continued for almost a great number of time, and he could have received a job from Mitibai College. Job from Mitibai College. Mitibai College. The job came to him in June, possibly 1961, and he continued working there, if I'm not mistaken, till 1976. So Mitibai College becomes the place where he could teach almost the longest term, if I remember, almost exactly. Here is from 1961 to 1972. He kept working there as a teacher and head of the Department of English, and many of the students and scholars could meet him there, and they were inspired from his works, and he could help them to develop their interest in poetry as well. So it was Mitibai College where he worked from 1961 to 1972, as the head of the Department of English. He had a visiting professor for the University of Leeds in 1964. Exactly when he was working for Shilpi, he got a chance to go to America, and for first time he had the aeroplane experience, that we can say that air experience. And in the words of Nissim, this tour to America was called by American experience. American experience for tour to America. And in 1964, he was the visiting professor at University of Leeds. University of Leeds in 1964. And the next is the university where he taught was a Indian University, University of Pondicherry. University of Pondicherry, where he taught in 1967. Pondicherry, where he taught in 1967 as a visiting faculty. Well, he always loved Marathi, but he regretted he didn't know Marathi properly and could never write the pieces in Marathi. So there is a statement from him, if I'm not mistaken, let me check it, for his love in Marathi. He wanted to write in Marathi, but unfortunately he couldn't do. I'm unable to find that statement, but he said that he regretted his whole life that he couldn't write in Marathi, and later on he found a chance to work with Vrinda Nabar. Okay, work with Vrinda Nabar, and with the help of Vrinda Nabar, he translated some poems of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Pandit J.L. Nehru, and naturally some Marathi poems. These Marathi poems that he, with the help of Nabar, Vrinda Nabar, he could translate were actually the works of a great Marathi poet, and the two had great understanding of this literature, and ultimately Indira Sant was translated. Indira Sant. Indira was a Marathi poetess, and her poem in Marathi were actually the center of his attraction. Later on, he translated it with the help of Vrinda Nabar. So his love for Marathi ultimately can be fulfilled, but not in the same way as he actually wanted. He wanted to be the master of this language himself. As I told you that they had this language as a mother tongue of their own, but couldn't write in that. His life was full of achievement, as you can see. Another, and possibly in Indian scenery, the greatest achievement that he received, he became, or he got the award of being the Sahitya Akademi Award winner. Exactly. In 1983, he received Sahitya Akademi Cultural Award. Sahitya Akademi Cultural Award. This happened in 1983, and it was for his collection of poems that were named to be Latter Day Psalms. Latter Day Psalms. Latter Day Psalms that appeared in 1982, and in 1983, for this collection of his poems, the Latter Day Psalms, Nissim Ezekiel was given this honor to win the Sahitya Akademi Award. Another thing that happened in 1988 was to receive the honor of being Padma Shri. In 1988, Padma Shri is the title he received. Padma Shri is a title that he received from the President of India in 1988. So he becomes the winner of Padma Shri as well, that came in 1988. One thing that he received from his cargo ship, if you remember, cargo ship from London to India, and there he received the title Able Sea Man. Almost 48 days, 48 days on that cargo ship working made him to be able seaman, and this is the title that is given to him for working on the deck of the ship as well. Life had lots of achievements, as I told you, but ultimately he had to fight with a disease that has been Alzheimer. This disease could defeat him, Alzheimer could defeat him, and unfortunately on 9th January 2004, he breathed his last. 9th January 2004, he breathed his last. After his death, there is end of an era, I can say, that was especially a leading era in poetry. One work that he wrote was entitled to be For Elkanah. For Elkanah, his son. Unfortunately, Elkanah committed suicide. Nobody knows why, but he committed suicide. Possibly, this suicide of Elkanah touched him and he could write. But according to Daisy, he never committed suicide. She had her own thinking over the death of Elkanah. But Nissim had written this work on the death of his only son, Elkanah. His achievements had been not less even in London. When he was in London, he was working at India House. When he was in London, he was working at India House before leaving for India in 1952. Means in 1952 he left London for India, and before that when he was there at Birkbeck College, so he was working there as well. India House is the place where he was working. He was buried in Mumbai after his death. Actually, he lived in Bombay and he was buried in Mumbai after his death. His love for Bombay is something that is not to be changed throughout his life. He said that he was a poet of Bombay exactly, and if Bombay is seen, it is the microscope of Nissim's skill, and he could present through Bombay the whole scenery of the world. What is his statement? Please write down about his place, about his love for Bombay, because he was born here and he thought he belongs to this place. Please write down. It's a statement for his native place, Bombay. What he said: I can't leave this island. I can't leave this island. Oblique. I was born here. I was born here and belong. One more thing before going to over this class, I want to tell that Nissim is a Jewish word. In Hebrew it is Nissim, but in English it means justice. Remember, the meaning of Nissim in English is justice. So Nissim was a Hebrew name, and in English it meant justice. And as I told you that his love for Bombay, his love for India, his love for city had been something that had been unsurpassed, unchallenged, and everyone who loved Indian English poetry definitely loves this poet of city. Definitely sometimes it is a discussion between among scholars that what is he. So you can see most of his poems are on city, so he is the poet of city. Nissim is considered to be the poet of city, but you cannot forget that some of his brilliant pieces like Background Casually and even The Night of Scorpion, if you remember, that was set at the place that was called Tal. If you remember, Tal was the place, and there it happened, I think around 1939. It was the incident of 1939 where his mother Diana was there, and unfortunately there was a scorpion which could sting her, and she fainted, and that whole episode he could narrate in that beautiful piece of his. If we remember, this is one of the most discussed, read and studied piece of Nissim skill, that's Night of Scorpion. So we will definitely have some brilliant pieces, but in the next class we will discuss on the works of Nissim skill at a glance. So thanks for the day. Have a great time, great joy, great happiness. Keep watching, keep learning, and keep working hard. And one more thing before leaving, that next time the question session will start. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.